So in our last video, we talked about opening up relationships and how to do that and what that might look like. And we talked specifically about opening up monogamous relationships. And one of the things that we didn't really get to in depth.
Yeah, we just mentioned it in passing.
Yeah, that one thing that can happen when you start to open up your relationship that you may not intend at the outset is that you might develop feelings or even potentially fall in love with somebody else. And we certainly have some experience with that from early on in our relationship. I think we did as many people seem to do based on what we've observed from people we know.
People.
Sorry?
We did many people.
We did. Yeah. We've seen many people in our lives do something similar, where they, in the beginning, they sort of tell themselves and their partner that they aren't going to, it's not about developing feelings for someone else.
Yes.
It's about exploring. And they don't have an intention to meet somebody, to have a serious romantic relationship with on an ongoing basis. But early on in our relationship, we had a similar sort of pact with each other, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did. We were meeting other people in a casual settings. We would have a lot of sort of rules in place, if you will, that made it a little more difficult to develop more intimate relationships. Mostly you would just see people once or twice. It wasn't an ongoing partnerships at first. And we did learn fairly quickly that that's not necessarily sustainable. Now, some people can do that forever, and that's 100% how they want to navigate their open relationship. And that's wonderful. But for us, and I think that for a lot of people that we know, the feelings do come up. They just do.
Yeah.
And we thought it would be a good idea to talk about what that looks like, what to do when that happens, how do you talk to your partner about it. Yeah, so I mean, we could talk about what happened to us.
Yeah. So we had this arrangement where we could see other people, but we couldn't develop feelings. And at first that seems like a reasonable limit on what we could do. But in hindsight, not particularly reasonable, because if you're being intimate with people, or even in my case, I hadn't even been intimate with the person. It was just the prospect of intimacy.
Yes.
I mean, it was intimacy of a different kind. It was, I could see that I had a connection with somebody on a deeper level. And that sort of surprised me and also scared me a little bit. But when it happened, I felt like I needed to talk to you about it. And I had this perhaps overly dramatic reveal that...
Yeah, because we didn't talk about it beforehand. Beforehand, it was like, we're fine to make out with other people, to obviously have sex with other people, but to want to go on dates, to want to get to know someone and kind of be in someone else's life in a meaningful, serious way, we really didn't talk about those things at all at first.
I remember we had this rule where there's no sleepovers too, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that was in part because we associated sleepovers with maybe, that's going to develop into something serious.
Yeah, I mean, there is an intimacy that can be built when you sleep over. I mean, when you have a sleepover with someone.
Yeah.
It happens all the time to a bunch of teenage girls.
Does it?
It does.
Okay.
I guess you wouldn't know.
No, guess not.
You didn't have sleepovers as a teenage boy? No, I guess not. That was
really.
a girl thing.
The teenage yeah, the sleepover sort of ended after like, for me anyway, about 12 or maybe
Yeah, I
13.
guess puberty, that makes sense.
But yeah, I had this dramatic reveal, and it kind of rocked our relationship for a day or so,
Yeah. Yeah.
where you went to go stay with your parents while I worked my shit out. Can I say shit? Well, I just did.
I think so.
And we had a conversation on the phone that night, and then what did we do?
Are you forgetting?
Yeah.
So long ago. This was like 13 years ago. It's 2025, by the way, if you're watching another time. Um, yeah, so you basically told me that you were developing feelings with someone that you were friends with, that you were and
Brand new friends. Just met the
yeah,
person.
and it sort of kind of spiraled you into this, what are we doing? Are there other people out there for us in the world? And we're just kind of locked into this one relationship. And I decided that if you and I were going to make this decision of whether we should stay together or not, we need to kind of need some space so that you can kind of have a decision that's not influenced by seeing me being sad about it, which was important because it's very hard to watch your partner be hurt by something that you are feeling.
Yes.
So I went and stayed with my parents, and then we talked about meeting up and talking. So we scheduled a date, and in my mind, I went through a process of just coming to terms with the fact that we might break up, and deciding that, well, let's go on one final kick-ass date. And I'm gonna show him what he's gonna miss out on for the rest of his
Oh
life.
dear, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I was going through stuff, and yeah, so we scheduled this date, and we went out and we had a great time. We talked about everything. And during that conversation, I think it became a little bit about philosophy. Really, what it came down to, we talked a lot about, there's at the time 6 billion people in the world, and I think so.
Okay.
It's close to 8 now. No,
Yeah.
more than 8 now. Um, and it's very possible that there could be other people in the world that we would love and want to share our lives with, and we just so happen to meet each other at this point in our lives.
Yeah.
So it's at the time it seemed almost silly and absurd to stop one another from exploring the possibility that there might be other people that we could connect with in a meaningful way, in the way that you felt about the person that you developed feelings for. And I remember, and he just turned to me and he was like, so what does it mean? Do we have to break up? And I said, no, we're just going to stay together and still do that.
Yeah, and I find it kind of amazing that we reached that conclusion without any model to follow. We didn't have the vocabulary of polyamory and non-monogamy. We read afterwards, we read The Ethical Slut. I remember we bought this
Yes.
book and we read it together. But at that point, we had no idea that this was something that people did. And we thought we were breaking new ground, like, what? This is a possibility? We can do this? I mean, it turned out.
And by this, we didn't even know what that meant,
Yeah.
because we didn't really know how we were going to fit another person into our lives,
Yeah.
or several people for that matter. I was excited to explore dating women. That was a whole other world that I got to tap into that I didn't before. So it was exciting, and I get that that's a unique perspective, because a lot of people that we know now are opening up to a partner that is not so welcoming and excited about this prospect.
Yes. Perhaps even like has deep anxiety about this
Yes,
prospect.
yes. Um, So at the very least, you and I had an easier time dealing with, like, I'm already okay with you sleeping with other people. So now I just have to deal with the fact that you're falling in love with another person, which is hard on its own, for sure. And yeah, we have fallen in love with other people in front of each other. And
Yes.
it's just,
And with each and like at the same time with
and
the
at the
same
same
person.
time with the same person. And I think, you know, looking back, it's easier to remember the good stuff and to know that it was all for in the service of love. Uh, but surely, there were hard times too.
Yeah, there were definitely hard times. They were all worth it. But I think it's hard to convince somebody who doesn't, who's never been exposed to it, and who isn't necessarily interested in exploring this part of themselves, or this pushing the boundaries of what it means to be in a relationship with somebody else, and like pushing our sort of socially constructed boundaries, let's say.
Yeah.
And I understand that, and I think, this is perhaps, I've seen in the people we know that their partners are willing to say, you go and explore. I want you to explore because I love you and I want you to do this thing that you clearly need for yourself. But, eventually you're going to get it out of your system,
Yes.
and you're going to just come back to the way things were, and we're just going to go back to being monogamous again, and then, but I think we're seeing that the people we know are like, but wait, I really like this freedom, and I'm interested. I'm not in love with anyone maybe yet, but I'm interested in exploring what that might look like. Um, and
Yeah.
then it's sort of like, how do I actually talk to my partner about this?
Yeah, so it does end up becoming a conversation about philosophy, which is how David and I started talking about it too. It is this idea of, can we love more than one person at the same time? And I think we touched a little bit about that in the other video too, about this capacity to love. And I do think it can be a fundamental difference between people and how they view love and how they navigate through love, deciding whether it's a finite thing or a reserved thing for a particular few people in your life. And especially romantic love is reserved to only one person. And then there are other people who kind of think that it's love is infinite and there is no
It's
end
all
to
love.
it, and that you can absolutely love more than one person at the same time. And I do think that that can be ultimately the thing that you and your partner may disagree on. And it is, at the core of it, a belief, because you can only really believe it if you feel it. And if you don't feel it, it may be very difficult to convince someone. I have the unique um, perspective of being in several relationships where one of them was introduced to polyamory through me and did not have another partner. Uh, and I have another partner who was introduced to polyamory through me, who does have another partner. And they are arriving to polyamory in a very different way, simply by having the the experience of loving more than one person at the same time. And I think that it was very telling that it's you do end up being freed in some ways when you realize that you do have that capacity to love more. I personally believe that everyone does, but not everyone is open to it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to love more than one person
No,
romantically your
definitely
whole
not.
life, and that's okay. You can love one person, and that's wonderful. I mean, we have convinced ourselves that it's so rare and so special to even meet one, let alone more than one. And if you do meet more than one, surely you need to only be with them one at a time, not
Yeah.
at the same time. So,
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. I mean, from my perspective, each love is different, you know, in a way. They're all sort of the same but different. I don't know. It doesn't.
well, the love I think is the same, but the way it manifests, the way it translates, the way it
Yes.
shows itself is different because
Yes.
you are different people. You bring different things out of each other, and that makes sense. In the same way that your love for your children, multiple children, you love them all the same, but your interaction and your dynamic with each child might be different, you know?
Absolutely. I find that people don't buy that argument very much when I sort of say that. Like, oh, you love your kid, both your children or all three of your children or however many kids you have. And you love them all, right?
Yeah.
And loving one doesn't take away the love you have for another one. But
Yes.
for whatever reason, people, when they think about romantic relationships, it's like just one. That's all I can have.
Yeah.
And I
We
think
reserve the romantic love for one.
it has to be like my special person, you know? Like this is the one person that I have this kind of relationship with. It's very interesting that
And
people
friends
have that.
too. You have many friends that you love. You love. And
Yes.
you have a different relationship with all your friends. But I mean, maybe you love some of them more than others, but I don't think we really think about our friendships in a hierarchy at all. So
I mean, people talk about having best friends, right?
that's true.
Yeah. But for whatever reason, people have that view. And there are limitations. I think the thing that we always talk about is time, right? You know, you have to have
Time and energy for
time
sure.
and energy
Those are finite.
And so, yeah.
Unlike love, which I think it is a very, very important distinction, you know, to talk about. It's like, yes, I can love infinitely, but I only have a certain amount of time and energy in the day to dedicate towards someone or someone's.
Yeah.
And that needs to be negotiated and that needs to be talked about and make sure that everyone involved is getting the attention and love that they need on a daily basis. And I do think that is a practical and pragmatic way of looking at it.
Yeah.
But without that first fundamental belief of thinking that you are capable of loving more than one person. So the consequences of having someone reject this idea that you can love more than one person at the same time, you would get pushback on, well, you must love me less if you're going to introduce someone
Yes.
else into to our relationship or to your relationship. And I think for whatever reason that seems to come up a lot. A lot of people feel that way, that there's just like this circle of love, and you're like each take a piece of the pie, you know. And surely if you're going to start adding more people, it's going to take a little bit of someone else's piece.
I think it might take a little bit of the time you have together, but it doesn't take the love away. It's
But it
I
should
feel like we're creating the lyrics to a cheesy rock song right now. But it doesn't take away. And if love's infinite, not taking anything away, it's just you might be taking away a little bit of the time you have together.
But you might not. This is a thing that happened to us, you know, like you were working a lot and had a lot of other things going on in your life. So me starting to date another person actually didn't take any time away from the time that you and I shared together.
Yes.
It just filled up the time that
We weren't
together. And there's a lot of time in a day. There just is.
There's time in the day, and you probably take it for granted that your partner's around. So maybe being with another person pushes you to love a little bit more intensely when you are together. Anyway, that's another way of looking at it. It
shifts the balance of energy and attention. It shifts the balance, and that is true, but often for the better if you're having intentional conversations about it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's sort of what this whole thing is about, is talking about it, is recognizing that if you're going to open yourself up, feelings are going to come up, and you're going to have to navigate that with your partner. And it might be challenging to get the pushback at first of them not believing that it's possible to love more than one person at the same
Yes.
time. Just bringing it all back.
Yeah, you did that segue very smoothly. It might be too smooth. Um, yeah, so I think the segue is that I just broke was, if you are opening up your relationship and you're discovering that you either want to or you are developing feelings for another person, and you might have this pact that we talked about earlier where, oh, I am not supposed to develop feelings. At what point do you try to bring up this topic with your partner?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of when, I think as soon as possible.
Yeah, ideally as soon as possible.
Ideally, as soon as possible. I mean, in my personal and coaching professional opinion, I think that you would benefit from talking about this hypothetical situation where you might develop feelings, and what would that look like and how would that feel like. Not that you're locked in to be true to what you think hypothetically you would feel, because obviously going through something might hit you differently than you would think, but it helps to flush it all out and to talk about your feelings and what you think you might be anxious about, what you might struggle with, what your strengths are, what you're going to benefit from. And I think that it may be easier to talk about it hypothetically before you meet someone, and now there's a third or fourth person whose feelings you have to take into consideration.
Yeah.
Because we've also had the experience of people not having that conversations with their partners, and it's really shitty. It's really hard and very difficult to navigate being broken up with or being sort of put on pause while people have to figure their shit out. It's not a nice position to be in. And us being open, it happens quite often.
Yeah. Well, it's not nice to be the person who gets broken up with, because when you're the one not putting any constraints on the relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. But I understand why that happens.
Of course.
But I think you're right that it's not always practical, and it's certainly very difficult to do. But if you want this kind of life, you really want it, then I think, yeah, I agree that it's important to start to have those conversations as early as possible, ideally before you start to develop feelings for someone else, because, yeah, you are responsible to some extent anyway for more than one. If you do develop feelings in a relationship with somebody, then their feelings are important too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a concept in this world called couples privilege.
Yeah.
And this is more at the earlier stages, but when you have a couple sort of meeting a third in this dynamic, there's this awareness that is asked of the couple to sort of treat the third as an equal and not kind of treat them as lesser than, or someone whose feelings are less important than the couple unit. And I think the same applies even if you're not part of a couple. Just in general, when you are starting a relationship with another human being, their feelings matter. They just do. and they're another person who you have to consider when things are not going well or things are rocky with your other relationships. And there's going to be a ripple effect, there's going to be impact all around, and that's okay. That happens, no different than in a friendship group when there's two friends that are not getting along and everyone else has to kind of deal with it. Yeah, and when you're choosing to sort of share your life with more than one person, everyone's feelings are important. And that's tough. That's a big deterrent as to why some people don't want to get into this lifestyle, because it feels messy and it feels complicated, and it's hard enough to sort of get one relationship sorted, let alone
Yes.
add more. And that's very important to find out about your primary relationships, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
You need to decide whether you can handle another person's feelings being considered when you're making decisions.
Yeah. All the more reason to have the conversation early, because I think this sort of thing can be very destabilizing for people who have grown up and lived under the assumption that monogamy is the only way to do things, and they had made assumptions about the nature of their relationship that are now shifting underneath their feet.
Yes.
And I think starting early is just a way of being compassionate and easing your partner into it. They may never accept it. That's something but that would also be something that would be good to figure out earlier on than later on, so you can make a decision with more information.
So, if nothing else, this is just like a public service announcement, right?
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, if you're opening up a relationship, an existing relationship, you want to prioritize the primary relationship, you want to strengthen it, you want to build on it, from it. But at some point, you also have to make space for other people in it, and therefore, it requires you to allow for more freedom, for more consideration, for more compassion, and there's a little bit of a delicate dance there that has to happen.
Yeah. Well, bring this thing to a close, but
Yes, until next time.
yeah. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you, David.